Thank you so much for coming to meet with us today. Absolutely lovely to meet you. What do you think about Ditch the Label?
Well, Ditch the Label is new to me. What I really admire about it is that it has a focus on people being treated equally, people being treated fairly and well, despite the ways that they're different. Not just the tolerance of difference, but the embrace of difference. People starting to see difference as valuable and understanding that the ways in which we're different actually make this planet more livable, more enjoyable.
Yeah. So you're talking about the work that you do in the US. Do you think there is a bit of a difference between the UK and US in terms of what issues are kind of at the pivot of equality and diversity at the moment?
Well, I mean, I think that there are a lot of young people who are taught from a very early age, whether you're born in the UK or the US, that somehow being different is scary. And that always bothers me, because I'm saying that kid's learning that difference is somehow bad, or there's something to be afraid of with people who are different. We aren't in the same places legally in the United States as the UK. The UK is a bit ahead of us right now in terms of LGBT issues. We're still having debates in the United States right now of whether or not gay and lesbian people should be able to get married, even hold a job. And so, in a way, we look to England as a country, as a place that sets an example,
yeah.
That we'd like to follow. And I do think it's important that the government, the land in which we live, supports diversity. And if your own government is saying, oh, it's okay to treat people differently, then young people will follow that lead, and that's dangerous.
So what was it that inspired you to become an activist?
I mean, I'm a storyteller before anything else. That's what I do. I tell stories. I just happen to tell stories about things that I've had experiences with. I think that's, what most good writers do. It just happens to be that I grew up in a really conservative religion in a conservative area in the United States, and I'm also a gay person. I write about that, and when you start to look at what's at the core of a civil rights movement, a successful one, it's storytelling. And you're not going to change hearts and minds. You're not going to make as much progress as if you just tell your personal stories. And I do that on a bigger stage because I use movie theaters and television to do it.
So would you argue that it's important for every single person to share their own stories for the benefits of others?
Yeah, no, I mean, storytelling is at the center of what we need to do to dispel the kind of lies and the myths, the stereotypes that are out there about LGBT people, and about any group of people, by the way. This goes beyond gay and lesbian issues. Any group of people who are different than the mainstream in some ways. I think it is at the core of how we correct the record. Because it doesn't matter how different you are, when you get to the core of what makes us tick, we share those feelings. The desire to love and be loved.
I think what you're saying really resonates with the work that we do, because not only does sharing your own story benefit another person who's perhaps going through something similar, but actually that release that you get, the emotional and psychological release of actually putting your story out there, is so incredibly powerful. And I think not many people actually realize how powerful that can be. I think as well, with a lot of the research that we do, people don't necessarily think in statistics. It is all about actual real life stories, real life experiences that people have had. So you were talking earlier about your individual experiences. What was that like growing up and knowing that you were different?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was different from a very, very early age. You can't grow up in the Mormon church as a gay kid and think that you're quote unquote normal according to your church. You know that your church thinks that you're a sinner, that you're, right down there with all the murderers and rapists. And literally the prophet of the church, when I was probably 5 or 6 years old, did what you would consider, I guess, a sermon where he said that homosexuality is a sin comparable to murder. And at that point, I already knew I was a gay kid. I already had crushes on boys, and it was deeply troubling to have the first time I start to have a crush, which should just be this innocent childhood crush. It's connected to things like hell. I mean, I'm 6 years old, and I already know I'm going to hell, and that I should be going to jail, and that according to some people, the feelings I was having could even be considered a mental illness. It does a lot of damage When you first fall in love, it should be one of the most exhilarating, exciting, scary, but scary for the right reasons moments that you'll ever have, right? You certainly shouldn't start to have a crush or feel an attachment and start to fall in love in the first time that you feel that. It should be attached to the fear of going to prison or electroshock therapy.
How did you get over feeling like that?
It took a really long time. Part of it was luck for me. We moved from Texas to California. We moved to an area that was more accepting, an area near San Francisco where there were openly gay people. And pretty soon you realize that openly gay people aren't all the things you've been taught your whole life in Texas and in the Mormon church, that these are happy people. They don't have horns coming out of their head like the Mormon prophet had said they would. It would take many years before I came out. But once I did come out and accepted myself, truly I can't exaggerate. I can't make more of the great change that came over me emotionally once you unburden yourself of the closet. It's the thing that I live by, that took me a long time to find, and it's the thing that I say to young people who are being bullied and harassed, is that I had to learn at a certain point that other people's opinions of me were absolutely none of my business. And that was, if they had an issue, if they had a problem with who I am, that's their business. But I gotta keep my eye on where I'm going and what I'm doing, and have faith that who I am and all of its difference is good. And it's really that lesson that's helped me start to grow.
With the rise in obviously social media, do you find that ever difficult to almost kind of blanket out that negativity that seemingly anybody who is high profile attracts online?
Yeah, I don't always block all of it out. I read some of it. People say some really terrible things about me. And I'm smiling because once you realize it's none of your business, you can start to see how ridiculous some of it is. And when you can start to have a sense of humor about it and realize that's their problem, man. That's their damage. And to start to see not just what the words are that they've written, but you sort of look beyond them. And you go, I wonder what happened to this poor, unfortunate soul that they felt like they needed to take that minute or whatever it took for them to write those hateful words. Like, where did that come from? What happened to them? And actually have compassion for them, because, they're also, they're having trouble. Flip it and care for that poor, tortured soul who felt that's what they needed to do in that moment in their life.
I think the perpetrator-orientated interventions is heavily within what we're doing at the moment, because we have a real problem, I believe, where we actually see people who bully and online trolls as being villains. That almost has a really negative impact, because if we villainize something by society, it makes it progressively difficult for those people to stand up and say, look, do you know what? I have a problem, I need help. And we should be helping those people. What do you think?
No, Nelson Mandela, who's a great hero of mine, when he was talking about liberation, and in this case it was about race, and he said we're not free until we're all free, and that includes the perpetrator, because that perpetrator is a prisoner of their hatred, and there is nothing that cripples a soul more than that kind of hatred. That person who's sharing their hate online, or in the government, or whatever it is, they are clearly operating from a lot of misinformation. Share who you are, share what your experience is, and oftentimes you can turn not all, but most of these folks around.
So what kind of advice would you give to somebody who may be watching this, who is trolling somebody online or is bullying them and just doesn't know what to do?
They should cut it out. First and foremost, it's and seek help themselves. I would ask anybody who is spending their time attacking other people, legislating against other people, to examine for a minute where that started and where that came from and why they're threatened. And I think oftentimes people think, oh, I'm just being funny. And it's funny, I'm gonna get attention from my friends. No, sorry, buddy. There is something there that you're feeling feeling that perhaps you're inferior in some way, that there's something broken about you, and I want you to get help to fix that. There is no purpose in hurting other people.
So what kind of advice would you give to somebody who is being bullied and is feeling worthless and has low self-esteem and isn't feeling particularly great about themselves?
Well, those are a few different kinds of people there. There are people who are being bullied who have a strong sense of self, and I like watching how those people react to bullying, and a lot of times they can react first and foremost. You can turn it off. You do not have to let their opinion affect your self-esteem. And you don't need to look at it, you don't need to read it, and you certainly don't need to give it much of your time. Continue to be who you are. And I frankly, and I don't know what the rules are in this world, I don't even engage with them. I think oftentimes that's a lot of what, particularly online, folks are looking for that sort of attention. Just block them, get rid of them. Don't let anybody distract you, and that's really what they're trying to do.
Yeah. So do you, as an adult, do you still feel discriminated against by the church?
Oh my goodness, yeah. There's many different churches who say that gay and lesbian people are less than other folks. That say that gay and lesbian people are going to hell just for who we are. But I've not shut the door. The Mormon Church came after gay and lesbian people in California in a big way with Proposition 8, which took away a right we already had, which was to get married. A lot of people were very angry. One of the church leaders even asked me, he said, Brother Black, at some point, do you want to have a family? And I said, absolutely, I want to have a family. I was raised Mormon, I want a big family. And there were tears in his eyes, and he said, well, we always just thought you were trying to deinstitutionalize marriage, to break it down. To which, I had to laugh. I'm like, why would we spend all this time trying to destroy something? We want to be included in the tradition of marriage, but we also want the protection and respect that it needs. We still have a lot of work to do. And those messages from the church are bullying. They are bullying. And that has to stop.
So what has been your proudest activist-related moment today?
Well, oh my goodness. There's been a lot of those. One of my proudest moments had to be sitting on the steps of the Supreme Court after half a decade of fighting to have Proposition 8, which had become the symbol of inequality, legalized. I kind of put filmmaking on the back burner for a few years to help wage that fight and bring our plaintiffs' case to the Supreme Court. And so that victory is one of my proudest moments. I'll never forget being able to fly back from the Supreme Court to California and to see our plaintiffs and then hundreds and hundreds of gay and lesbian couples actually getting married in San Francisco City Hall, where Harvey Milk first successfully ran and was a city supervisor. It was a pretty poetic moment.
I can imagine it was really emotional.
It was very surreal. I dared to dream many times that we could overturn Proposition 8. And when it really happened, it was hard to believe that we'd actually done it. And it was a real lesson in how we can create change.
So other than LGBT-related issues, what do you think is next on the agenda of diversity?
I hope we can work on multiple fronts. When it comes to difference and diversity, there's an infinite variety. Places where I see a great need for more understanding, certainly on trans issues. I know we see that in the United States right now. I'm not sure about England, but what's happening is we're starting to see more and more depictions of trans people in the media, which is fantastic. It's sort of like what was happening in the late 80s into the 90s for gay and lesbian folks. More and more young trans folks are coming out, talking about who they are, and because they're inspired by what they see on TV, and they're being attacked for it. They're not finding the support that they need within schools, within their communities, to make sure that they are being respected and protected. But that's not the only group. I still see so many outdated ideas about who we are and who we're all supposed to be and who we're all supposed to look like. I see it when it comes to people's weight, to body image issues. How we haven't created more understanding that people look different than one another. People weigh different amounts than one another. I don't know why we can't create better understanding around that and to stop that sort of persecution, because it's wrong. And certainly I think there's still issues around gender, young women being treated differently and unequally under the law in society, by church, which is wrong. And certainly in America right now, I think income inequality, folks are struggling to survive, and there are families where the kids are living in families where the parents are just struggling to put food on the table, and folks are being bullied because they make less. There's so many different places that people are being bullied for how they're different, and I really hope that we can really create greater understanding in all of these areas. I think we have the time, we have the energy, and certainly we can find the means to educate in all of these different places.
You mentioned about appearances. We've just produced some research. How shocked would you be to find out that 47% of young people would change the way they look, and kids as young as 13 are considering liposuction, Botox, breast enlargements, really invasive surgeries to conform to societal standards? Would you be shocked by that?
No, we live in a culture that's selling a certain kind of body image. Unfortunately, we don't live in a culture that's showing a great variety of body images, and certainly not ones that are reflective of who we really are. And it's not even terrifically accurate, by the way. I mean, I have a lot of straight friends, and they like a little booty. You know what I'm saying? It's like I sometimes I see what's being put on billboards and in ads, and what's being marketed at us. And by the way, none of those models, because I know some of them, even look like that. They've all been sort of crunched this way and photoshopped that way. And then I'll hang out with my straight guy friends and see who they're attracted to, and it doesn't even look like that. We're being sold a lie, and it's a really narrow one, and it's a really boring one. It doesn't surprise me that young people are having body image issues, because none of us can walk around in real life with Photoshop or Facetune. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It's shameful that that's what's being marketed to us, and hopefully we can do the work to start to correct that. And by the way, I think there is a world in which we can be marketed to in more diverse ways to understand the variety of beauty. You walk into a museum and you look at what beauty has been over the ages, and it's very diverse. There's certainly room for that sort of creativity. It's just unfortunately not there. Right?
Do you ever feel under pressure to look a certain way?
Yeah, for sure. We all do.
Yeah.
We all feel a little pressure to be a certain way sometimes. But I had a really good mom, and she created a really good. I was lucky in this way. She didn't accept me right off for being gay, but she listened, and she eventually did. And what she instilled in me was a real sense of self-worth. We can be diverse in so many different ways.
Do you find that being a high-profile activist and writer, do you find that you have to sacrifice an element of your personal life?
Yeah. If you're going to do something where you're out in the public eye, you certainly open yourself up to being examined in a different way. That's true. I'm all right with that. It's not something I ever expected to have happen, but certainly the reasons why I'm in the public eye have to do with the kinds of films I make, the kinds of stories I tell, which do lean towards a better understanding of diversity, which is all about storytelling. So how hypocritical would it be if I said, well, let's all talk about our stories and let's all come out, but don't look at mine. It doesn't work like that. It's not always comfortable, but you know, it's part of the thing. It's part of what I signed up for.
If you had to give 3 tips to somebody who's watching this video and is affected by similar issues to you or is being bullied, what do you think they'd be?
2 things. One, I would hope that you can really say, hey, how much attention am I giving that bully or those bullies or that negativity? You know, and is there a way for me to turn my attention away from that and back to what it is I'm doing? And that's what I ask folks. What are you here for? What are you interested in? What are you doing? What do you love? And how can you keep your eye on that? It doesn't matter, by the way, who you are and what you look like. There's always going to be those folks who are out there to bully you and distract you from your real purpose. And I'd say keep your eye on that. I'd repeat myself and say their opinions, other people's opinions, are none of your business. Repeat that to yourself constantly. It is none of your business what they think. And number 2, I would say if it's getting really bad, tell somebody. Reach out and find that support that you need. And even if if you're a gay or lesbian person and you're in an unsupportive home or church or school, there are still numbers you can call and places you can go online to get help and to share your story and to get those feelings out of what it was like to be bullied. Don't do it in isolation.